This is Dr. Keith. I want to talk to you a little bit about love. Now, love is one of those words where everyone thinks they know what it means, and yet almost everybody disagrees with everybody else. It's not really an easy word to define, but I want to give you a sort of basic concept of this, what love technically means. It's kind of it's philosophical understanding and explanation. And I want to break things down a little bit. For example, let's separate out the sexual thing, romantic sexual love, which is rather different from the generalized overall kind of love that I want to talk about. And I'm also not necessarily talking about, absolute unconditional love. But anyway, I'll come to my own wording and definition in a minute. Let's just kind of move the sexual things over. There we're talking about lust, desire, need. Now, there's nothing wrong with these. There's nothing wrong with lust. If you've got the feeling on you, enjoy it. And I hope you're in a position where you can satisfy your longings and your needs pretty well with somebody that you like and care about, somebody you love indeed. But I want to point out that that kind of, lust and desire is actually basically want. It's lack, in other words. You want something. You don't have it. You lack it. So you want it, or you feel you need it. You have to have it. That's that kind of pattern of love. And it's that gives rise really to the sayings like the pain of love, and you always hurt the one you love. And any experience of love is bound to end in pain and disaster. All of that really comes from the want part, the lack, the need, the lust, the desire. As I said, nothing wrong with it, but if you're going to play in that particular pool, you've got to get used to the idea of getting wet. And yes, maybe you will get hurt now and again. But that's a very kind of limited meaning of the word love. I mean, for example, just look at the way people behave. They can be excited and aroused and lusty and, wanting each other right at the beginning, but then things gradually cool. And as the years go by, the people are maybe not so actively engaged in that sort of throaty, lusty hips and loins and juices and things. It's a biological thing, isn't it? It really is part of our creature. Now, in Supernoetics, we very definitely separate creature and spirit. The creature is one end of the spectrum. It's a biological thing, an organism. It doesn't really matter whether you're living in that creature or not. It's going to want to feed. It's going to want to breathe oxygen. It's going to want to reproduce. So it wants sex. It desires to survive. It wants sort of immortality through procreation. And so, of course, its principal emotion actually is fear. You could die one day and you're suddenly gone. So an organism or a creature is living basically in the margins of fear. That's just by the nature of things. Now, the kind of love I want to talk about comes from the spiritual domain, being spirit. Now, let's have an intermediate step here, which is what we call non-material mind or extended mind. This goes beyond the idea that we are a brain, or we're in our brain, or we think with our brain. We are really non-material mind. And that's another talk. There's plenty of information on my website and other websites about what we really mean by extended mind. But maybe just, before we leap off into the dark, as it were, and talk about love from that perspective, maybe it'll help to think of it maybe like I haven't got a smartphone here, but if you think of take out your smartphone, take a look at it. You will know that there are times when you hear sounds and you can listen and it's kind of saying words to you. It's relaying ideas, but you know very well they don't come from the phone. They come from the person you're calling, who could be 2 or 3 continents away from where you are. So if you think of the brain that way, the brain can relay communications and messages. It can transport thoughts and ideas. To a limited extent, it can hold memories of a certain kind anyway, although the vastness of memories with the greater being of spirit mean that they've got to be stored somewhere else. And more importantly, they're not stored in any physical form at all. Storage would be wrong. And we do now understand the idea that if you want to remember something from the deep depth of consciousness, you create the memory. You don't kind of go through the card file and pull out the card and say, oh yes, that's what happened. No. And this is science, by the way, from Harvard University and other places, that what we do is recreate the memory. And at the moment we do, at that point, memory is very plastic and adaptable, and we can change it. And of course we use that in our Supernoetics piloting, where we strike at that very moment when it's recreated, and we can alter it. We can take out the poisons and the toxin, the hurt, the unpleasant emotions, and indeed we can even add things like imbuing it with new insights and new ideas, affection, wisdom, and all those kind of things. Anyway, that's just simply to move the brain over. We're now talking about non-material mind, the spirit, theta being, it's sometimes called in the New Age, one mind or the great mind. Doesn't really matter what you call it, but the point is that it's non-material, it's vaster than we are, it extends outwards. And so here we're talking about the nature of being. You know, one of the fundamental principles of Supernoetics is we are as big in being as the space we can occupy. Being equates to space in a way. So, you know, if you can reach out and feel the farther reaches of the cosmos, great for you. That means you're big in being. But anyway, let's come back to the subject of love. And it's connected with being. Because if we go right back to the beginnings of everything, before there was time, before there was stuff, you know, if consciousness came first, then there wasn't any matter, energy, space, or time. Consciousness just is. And in fact, matter, energy, space, and time were created within consciousness. Now that's very different to modern science, of course, that tries to claim consciousness arose within a bunch of molecules. It was just some lucky break someday, sometime long ago, a bunch of molecules woke up and said, hey, we're here, we're awake, we're conscious. It's the biggest load of baloney and tripe you can ever imagine. And I'm not even dressing it up as silly. That's what they're in effect saying. No, if we reverse that and consciousness came first, then it means matter, energy, space, and time are within consciousness and not the other way around. Now, this has huge implications. For one thing, it suggests that consciousness was able to create matter, energy, space, and time. So if it can create them, it should be able to control and manipulate them. And there are some clues for this, you know, in remote viewing and telepathy, that really in consciousness we have a lot more control over these space-time elements than we'd like to believe. But look, here's the thing. If consciousness came first, and matter, energy, space, and time, in other words, reality, the cosmos, everything that is within consciousness. Now that means it all contains consciousness. For our definition of love, we use a word that is interpenetration. Interpenetration means you're in the same place, you're occupying the same thing. Not really, you know, one on top of the other, or like there's a brain and there's some aware entity in charge of it. It's that consciousness and awareness pervades everything. You know, brains, bones, planets, suns, stars, rocks, plants. Everything is pervaded by consciousness. So that means we truly do have a conscious or living universe. And you can work this out from first principles. If consciousness came first, then it must be so. And the other word that we use a lot, apart from interpenetration, means that, you know, we are being is in the same place as the tree we're looking at, or the perfectly lovely person that we're in love with in front of us, or family and friends. As well as interpenetration, we can say enfolding. They're similar words, but not mean quite the same thing. But enfoldment is a very key word in this hardcore definition of what love really is. And it means, in effect, that in your being, you are in love with, interpenetrating, interconnected with and enfolding everything that is, all that is, whether you want to call that the cosmos, God, or anything else, everything that is, you are part of that. Now, of course, it's one of our sayings, by the way, that we know everything. We just have to selectively unknow things. Otherwise, we just can't function. We just can't perform. And we choose, in fact, in the end, to unknow a lot of things. So we're left living this life as human beings that's really quite, destitute. It's small, it's impoverished. There's a sort of, what Aldous Huxley called a measly trickle of these kind of psychic and awareness and consciousness phenomena, but it's nothing like it should be. Well, unfolding and unraveling that is the main core mission of Supernoetics, but let's just stick with love again. So love means this interpenetration of everything in our being. It means in the original, or our original format, or our native being, or as I like to call it, primal consciousness, we are in love with everything. Everything is imbued with us, ourselves, our being. And so really, we have a saying in Supernoetics that love is in the nature of our being. Love is something we are. Love isn't something you give, or love isn't something you get. That's the kind of sex lust end. Love isn't even something you do. Love is something we are. It is the nature of our being that we interpenetrate and enfold everything. The implication of that is awesome. First of all, it means you're free to love anything and everything and all of it at once. You're not going to burn the top of your head off or explode your skull by loving everything at once. But it does mean in the reverse that if you choose to disconnect that love, you choose to shut something off, then you're breaking down a part of your being. You're denying an aspect of your being. Now, this is where we're getting to the good stuff, because we know that our love or feelings of love can get us into really bad trouble. And if we start disconnecting from things we don't want to, I don't love that anymore, I don't love you anymore, we're shutting down our being, and that's the beginning of shrinking and smallness. We're getting less in being because we're refusing to accept this whole panoply, a pantheon, I should say, which is the whole array of gods and godness and spirit and being. We are shutting ourselves off selectively from parts of this. Well, over many lifetimes and the eons, we've shut off from far too much, meaning we're tiny little shriveled beings. We have to grow outwards, and that's what Supernoetics piloting is all about. But the key to it is love. If you can restore the willingness to be and to express and manifest love to everything, not just the things you like, but to everything. So now let me bring up the subject of unconditional love. You've heard this. Unconditional means love means there aren't any conditions. You love them anyway. Now, it doesn't mean you have to like what a person's doing. If you can see a drunk killing him or herself, you don't have to like that. It can be quite discouraging and hurtful to watch, painful to look at even. But the point is, you don't love them less because they're doing it. You don't say, well, look, if you clean up your act and stop drinking and speak normally, I will love you again. That's not unconditional love. Unconditional love isn't, I love you if you love me, and I want as much love back from you as I'm giving to you. That's another thing, love accountancy, that we joke about in Supernoetics. You count out so many credits of love. Well, you've had 17 credits and I want at least 17 back. Or I'll be generous and I say I want 15 anyway, 15 or more. 25 is good, but you've got to be around the 15 mark, otherwise I'm giving you more than I'm getting. That just does not work. And it's a glorious thing that it doesn't work, because actually love is one of those things, the more you give, the more there is to give. You never, when we talk about accountancy, you can't spend it all. The faster you spend it and give out love, the more there is to give. That's not like accountancy, is it? The more money you spend, the more money comes in. Doesn't usually work like that, at least not in my experience. But love does. So you've got to learn the art of giving love, of being loving. the people you're with, even if you've not spoken to them for years or decades, or you're married to somebody when you just can't talk anymore, it's just all so bad and so negative, you could not walk up to your spouse and say, I love you. He or she would freak and think, what are you on? This is just not acceptable or understandable behavior. But look, if you can't hack that, let me make a suggestion for you, which is that you at least say, I feel loving. You could say that to your spouse. I feel loving. Something inside of me is welling up. It's that loving feeling, and I feel kindness and love. And the person might look a bit odd, but they can handle that. If you've despised your husband for 20 years and suddenly say, I love you, it's going to put up a huge barrier like that. Things will just clash one on the other. It won't work. But you can sneak around this barrier by saying, I feel loving, and make sure the person can see that you are. And this is what my series of teachings, wonderful series of teachings called Healing a Lifetime of Love, is all about. It's about recovering that ability to love and to function in love. And you will not believe the rewards that come to you. First of all, the absolute tidal wave of love that will come towards you, and you'll be astonished. But also the tidal wave of love to give, as I've explained. Once you start releasing it, it's like opening a sluice gate or a shutter. The flow starts, and then the flow just begins to increase and increase and increase. And the more love you give, the more there is to give. The more love you give, the more comes back into you. And you can recover from all sorts of desperate conditions. Listen, my first wife, we quarreled when she left. It wasn't a happy time. But now, I can't say it's all restored. She lives 6,000 miles away. But, whenever I see her, it's kisses, hugs, cuddles, praise, and loving thoughts and kindness. Because what's the point of doing anything else? If you are ever married to a person, you are ever in love with a person, it must still be there. It's one of the fundamentals I teach, that love does not die. Love cannot die. If love isn't there anymore, it was never love in the first place. It was maybe that other stuff, lust and cravings, or need and desire. But love, as I express it, which is this outward going enfoldment and interpenetration of all things, can't die, it can't go away. All you have to do is wake it up. And as soon as the parties concerned stop being nasty to each other and saying, you bitch, you bastard, you bully, as soon as you dump all that stuff, love can reappear and life can begin again. And there's no reason why you can't love all the people you've ever met. Obviously, some more than others. And the person you're currently with as your current number one, that person has to be honored above all else and above everybody else. But, it doesn't mean that you can't love others. You probably heard this debate. Is it possible to love two people at once? A man loves two women, say, or a woman's married to one guy and loves this other. Is it really possible to love two people? Of course it is. You can love 50,000 at once. All genuine, passionate belonging, connectivity and love, this enfoldment and interpenetration feeling. Yes, of course you can. You won't have time to go round them all and kiss them all every day or make love to them all once or twice a month. That kind of doesn't work, what you might call the logistics of love. But the feeling of and the connectivity and the belonging, the person being there and the being of love, you can dish it out to as many people as you want. And I encourage you to start doing that right now. As I said, go out and start with the people you're immediately connected with. You'll meet them in the building or meet them at work next day. And start with this very simple and very humble saying, I feel loving. They might ask you to explain that, and you can say more about what I've been just teaching you. Well, I feel more connected. I feel I'm enfolding and allowing more into my life. I do not reject or negate things anymore. Things in my life, if I shut them off and negate them, then I'm diminished in myself, and you make yourself a smaller being. If you love a lot of people, And that's what, saintly people and the Christ figure, if there ever was such a figure, but the image of Christ is all supposed to be emanating love. And there's this kind of glow, a transparent glow around a person. Listen, I think love is something you can reflect. If you look at a guru or a film star, I've met a few, living here out west, I lived in Los Angeles for a time. I've met and seen a few movie stars. I don't count them among friends, but I've been in their presence and spoken with some. And I can tell you that there is something radiating, something about celebritism. They radiate it back because they're getting it in from fans. They're being loved and adored and all this wonderful loving feeling is coming. And then they can give it out again too. So these kind of people will often radiate love. And if you want to find a guru or a teacher or even just a coach, for goodness sake, make sure it's someone that is emanating that feeling of love, that you can feel the love flowing from them, because that's important. So one last little tip then. Remember, this is only the beginning of this pathway, healing a lifetime of love, which can be done. But using what I've just taught you, you'll realize love is being, theta being, it's power, it's knowledge, it's understanding. And you can actually use this to solve problems. You can use it for silly things you've probably heard. Find the missing car keys. Just strike up a chord with the car keys and they'll show up because you're now loving them. If you go around angry, those damn car keys, where the hell are they? Then they're not going to connect with you because you're emanating a lack of love. But you can actually solve problems. Obviously, if you've got a troubled marriage, you can solve that with love. If you give enough love to the troublesome spouse that you're not getting on with, then you can see that that's going to start to heal and be solved. But you can actually love all kinds of things. You can love, a wart or a swelling, and it will go away. You can love a maths problem, and it will, it won't go away, but the solution will come to you. You can use love as a tool or an application. And I don't mean anything corny, like, like a knife out of the drawer and you carve your food with it. No, I don't mean a tool in that clumsy, clunking sense. But as an instrument with which you can do things and achieve things. Okay, so I'm going to be unfolding all of this in Healing a Lifetime of Love, a whole series of videos, somewhat like this, but I did want to lay this one down at first just so that we're very clear about what we mean by love. Love is a state of being. It's not a possession or a property. It isn't an action. It's a state of being. You are love. We are love. And so to the degree you don't give out love, to that degree you're shriveling yourself. And that's something we teach very notably in Supernoetics. You're mostly doing it to yourself, and you've got to stop doing this. You've got to stop shrinking yourself and your worldview, and you've got to think of yourself as this enormously powerful, wise, energetic, loving being, because you are. You just have to take the stops off, take the padlocks off, open the doors, undo the catches, throw the windows open, as it were, to the cosmos, and go out and then say, yes, I'm here, I love everything, I love everybody. I don't want you to be corny, but I do want you to feel that, feel it deep inside, even if you never show it in front of others. But do try and expand your lovingness in front of other people as much as you can. You'll enjoy what you get back, and more to the point, others will enjoy having you with them. Okay, I hope you find this useful. Thanks very much for watching.